So it's my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Honourable Sue Conroy, Australian Senator and the Minister for Broadband Communications and Everything Good. Steve, of course, has also been working in this area for a long time and has been one of the leaders in pushing forward this radical new Australian approach. I just want to share two things before we hand it over to Steve. First of all, Ali mentioned the origins of the top of World War I. What he may not know is that in World War I, the Australians were under the command of the Brits, and we ignored the order and dug deeper trenches. And so that's why the Brits call us diggers. And nobody wants to go down to the Telecom as well in Australia. The second thing that I want to mention is that Steve is actually a student of mine. I was an economics tutor back in 1983, and I remember he wrote a paper, the term paper, and showed a particular interest in the topic of political rent seeking. So, I can see.
What grade did he get?
He's
very fast.
Yeah.
He's a hard knock.
Well, the guy who came first in the class now holds the Ken Lay chair, and we can point to the race. So. Anyway, so I was influenced by this paper on rent seeking as well, and ended up in the telecom world as well. So, what can you say? All right, I'm going to hand it over to Steve. Thanks.
Well, I firstly say thank you to for the invitation. I didn't realise until this morning that Simon was actually on the panel and speaking as well when I arrived. And I haven't seen Simon for 30 years. But first I didn't recognise him. He doesn't have his pointy shoes anymore. He doesn't have his drainpipe jeans on from uni. But I learned more about economics from Simon in the bar and on the golf course. So I learned from him in the tutorials and the lectures. But it is great to see you. Could I also say that it sounds like an Australian conspiracy it is. Paul Woody is also one of Australia's premier commentators and analysts in the broadband and transsector debate. And Paul Signet, you asked a question before, another Australian is well known to me and well known to many of you in this room as a former head of ICANN. So I apologise if this looks like a complete Australian takeover. It actually seems to be. As we enter 2012, more than 2.3 billion people were online worldwide. Public policymakers and governments are grappling with the challenges this presents, such as the challenge of replacing ageing communications infrastructure, the challenge of new business models and over-the-top services, and the international nature of service provision. These are right in the focus of this conference, and I would particularly like to talk about something that has been canvassed quite a bit, and Paul mentioned a little bit. The issue of how to upgrade your communications infrastructure, and more importantly, how we're doing it from our perspective in Australia. Our aspiration for better broadband is reflected in both sides of the Atlantic in public policy. The US National Broadband Plan has as its goal 100 million US homes should have affordable access to actual download speeds, and I emphasise the word actual download speeds of at least 100 megabits, and actual upload speeds of at least 50 megabits by 2020. And to put that in perspective, there are currently just under 115 million households in the US, and the digital agenda for Europe has as its goal to ensure that by 2020 all Europeans have access to higher internet speeds of and above 30 megabits, and 50% or more of European households subscribe to internet connections above 100 megabits. So once again, to put that in context, that would be about 220 million households in Europe by 2020. And in Australia, as a number of people have mentioned, we have very similar ambitious goals. We are building a national broadband network to every home and every business across Australia. This network will provide internet speeds of up to 1 gigabit to 93% of premises, with satellite and wireless to provide no less than 12 megabits to the remaining 7%. Now we do have a federal structure in much the same way as the US does, but it's also got some important differences. So when I talk about our model, it is unique because of our unique set of circumstances, our unique constitution, and our unique legal process. We are in the fortunate position that the regulation of telecommunications powers in Australia is exclusively federal. That means I'm in charge of spectrum auctions. And if I say to you, everyone in this room, if you want to bid next week in our spectrum auction, you better wear red underpants on your head. I've got some news for you. You'll be wearing them on your head. I have unfettered legal power. There's a seriously important difference before you try and say, hey, you can take the Australian model and you can take it overseas. Not many regulators have quite that much power. But we don't just have the power, we believe we have the responsibility to do so. Governments in all countries have long played a critical role in infrastructure provision, but in recent years it has been highly contentious. In many ways, only a government can bring to bear the long-term perspective necessary for true nation-building projects. This is nothing new, but especially not here in the US. As noted in Felix Rohatyn's book, Bold Endeavours, a visionary and innovative government can finance and build significant projects that will dramatically improve the national wealth and quality of life. His book contains many examples of infrastructure investment by US governments, both federal and state. Let me just mention a couple. The Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the country, was motivated by the need to secure port facilities in New Orleans, but the consequences were much more dramatic. It helped to further democratise the US, create the opportunity for more of its citizens to become property owners. Here in New York, you well know the Erie Canal, linking the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. It helped to create a central place that this city still holds in world trade and finance. Transcontinental Railroad, pursued by President Lincoln in the midst of war. It was a truly bold endeavour that linked the East and the West and transformed the nation. And more recently, of course, the interstate highway system, described in the book as America's vital core infrastructure, the creation of the longest and most extensive engineered roadway in history. Well, the role of government in building infrastructure should not surprise us. It is one of the reasons, certainly in Australia, for the existence of government. That the private sector in Australia has failed to make major infrastructure investments is becoming evident for the next generation for networks and telecommunications. I unfortunately share Simon's bleak, this could be a coincidence, I'm not sure, Simon. I share his bleak thoughts for telcos. There have been monopoly profits being made for as long as you can remember, and they're just not available anymore under the new system. It's really as simple as that. Wary investors, tight capital markets are discouraging new investment. The global financial crisis has added to the difficulties of private sector financing of large infrastructure projects. Yet these next generation networks need to be built to provide the wider social and economic benefits that they bring. Investing in infrastructure for the future is a social issue and something certainly our government deeply believes in and cares about. So let me just take you quickly through what we're doing in Australia. We were one of the leading countries in the 1980s and 90s in introducing reform of regulations around telcos in the world. Time doesn't permit me to go through all of the details of the journey, but we started out in the 80s and 90s deregulating in telcos. But the outcome in Australia was still a highly integrated incumbent telco. Most of you will probably know it as Telstra, and it dominated the industry. Even today, Telstra makes 92% of the profits in the entire telco industry, 15 years after we deregulated and opened it up to competition. 92% of the profits. So, despite regulatory changes, as I said, to promote investment certainty, the government was unable to encourage investments in new broadband infrastructure. Proposals by an incumbent, and Paul mentioned them, and a few people chuckled, but be sure what Paul was telling was true. Telstra offered to upgrade from our copper network to a fibre to the node or cabinet, but they wanted $150 a month to be able to charge for a 24 megabit speed. $150 a month. And they would only build it to about 50% of Australia's population. They kindly offered the government the opportunity to build the greatest white network in history and build the remaining 50% in a country outside. Imagine the amount of losses that are just building to the most remote area of Australia. So the Labor government decided we needed action to improve the quality and reduce the cost of broadband access. Because one of the things I always find amazing in this debate, telecommunications, broadband, is an input cost to all other businesses. So we want to make sure our input cost of business is as low as possible. And that's something that motivated the government as well. So we actually held a tender for, at that time, a fibre to the node cabinet network to operate on an open access basis. The government offered about $5 billion as an incentive to be part of the build, and we decided to take the opportunity to structurally separate the sector, to create a wholesale network and a retail set of providers who would all compete on the one wholesale network, separate. Our tender process was conducted in 2008, not a great year to be running a tender for a big election. Not a great year. Started off, the plan, we got elected in November. The plan went public in about January, February. I think hearings went down in February, March. Started the tender process in April. It was closing in November, just after Lehman Brothers went down. So capital markets had dried up. We received no proposals that offered value for money. We had a highly contentious dispute with the incumbent, who did have plenty of money, but still was trying to play by its rules. So we found that Australians' telecommunications needs were not going to be served into the future. So we decided to take a long-term view. We believe that this is a transformative, disruptive technology that all Australians deserve to share. Being fortunate that we had a very strong balance sheet, and we still have just about the strongest economy in the world at the moment. I think we had 4% growth last year, 5% unemployment, about 3% inflation at the moment. So we're in a very strong position, and we're scheduled to be, our budget is scheduled to be in surplus despite having a huge deficit over the last few years. Due to the global financial crisis, we're scheduled to be in surplus next financial year. So we established a company, NBN Co, as it became known, as a government-owned corporation with an independent commercial board. Its purpose was to design, build and operate a new wholesale-only open access NBN fibre to the home. The network will make high-speed broadband available, as I said, every home, school, university, doctor's surgery, pharmacy and business. The standard installation is free from the wholesaler, and wholesale prices are set at a uniform national rate. It does not matter where you live in Australia, you pay the same price, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the fibre platform, satellite platform or the fixed wireless platform, you pay the same price for the same speed. As a result, our entry-level retail packages are priced at or below existing services. So if you're paying $50 a month, you're paying $50 a month or a bit less for your entry-level prices. On average, our dollar's about the same as yours at the moment, a little bit ahead, about that. But we've got commodity prices and they're coming up a bit, so it's probably about level today. So we're in a situation where your cheapest entry-level broadband price in Australia now, for 12 megabits down, 1 megabit up, is $30. And the average price is probably going to be closer to $40, but so they're the absolute low end. So we're looking at prices between 12 meg of, say, $40, 100 meg of about $100 a month. And we have caps, which is something a little unusual to the rest of the world. So you also get a cap on the amount of downloading you can do and upload. And again, they're now flexible. We've got 40 retail service providers, 40 offering packages now around the country. We've got very serious. Europe usually aren't big fans of my model. I've been offered money not to come to Europe to talk about this. And so we are 1 year into a 10-year build, so let's not pretend that this is an easy and quick thing to do. We expect that by about June next year, we're getting close to doing 5,000 homes a day. 5,000 homes a day, roughly, by June next year, but it'll take us nearly 10 years to complete the whole project. We've got about 12 to 13 million homes by the end of it, and so it is a massive, massive construction operation, as well as an engineering project. The NBN is funded by government debt, so roughly $38 billion. About $31 billion is being provided by the government, and the remaining will be raised by NBN as its balance sheet goes positive. So it'll take about 8 years before we actually start making money, and then we're in a position where we are able to start raising our own debt for the National Broadband Network Company. But, and again, this will be very controversial, we're only requiring it to make 7% a year. Now, no self-respecting telco gets out of bed for less than 20% a year, so 7% is certainly not an attractive proposition. No private sector company will do what we are doing. We're very clear about that. They're not going to spend $2 billion on a couple of satellites that serve 3% of the population. They're not going to spend a couple of $billion on a fixed wireless network to serve 4% of the population. And they're certainly not going to build as deep as 93%. So it is radical, it is controversial, but construction is well underway. Now you might think, why would you do this? It's a layer 2 network. It's not allowed to offer layer 3 services. It's open access, it's wholesale only, non-discriminated, and it is heavily regulated by our competition regulator. We've got a whole range of new powers in place so that our regulator could have some genuine teeth in dealing with it. Now, we have Australia Post as well, which is similar to other national posts. Australia Post is about to announce in a couple of weeks a digital mailbox. And people keep saying to the chief executive, why are you cannibalising your business? To which his response is, if I don't, someone else is going to. So, being a fixed delivery network, we have a universal service obligation. You've got to have a post box and a collection every day for a certain number of homes. So you've still got this fixed network. But the chief executive of Australia Post recognises that if he does not change, if he does not accept the inevitable, he is going to be out of business. And the same way the Royal Mail in the UK is a massive loss maker and yours here is a massive loss maker, Australia Post will become a massive loss maker. So there are enormous disruptive pressures coming in every sector, and infrastructure providers and telecommunication services are just another victim. And I share Simon's very bleak concerns. The one difference in Australia is that we only have one, believe it or not, monopoly, one provider of cable television. They believe they're going to become the single largest provider and customer on the national broadband network. Their plan is to move as much of their interactive services online. They're happy to keep satellites, very cheap form of distribution, but interactive services, they believe, and they use cable HFC at the moment, they believe the NBN, the fibre to the home, is absolutely the model for them. So it may sound like quite an extraordinary set of circumstances in Australia. It truly has been. We had to take a big bang approach to what was the most consolidated market in the world. Just about. Our competition regulator said we were the most dominated by one company telco market in the world. We had one cable operator, and I think Paul might have mentioned, but our incumbent telco owns half of our cable operator. I'm not joking. So we have had very major debate in Australia. It's still front page news. If you were to pick up Australian newspapers today, tomorrow, yesterday, the last 2 years, you would find the broadband debate has been on the front pages of our newspapers at least once or twice a week. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're doing it. I don't expect everyone to agree. We have a unique set of circumstances. But we believe fundamentally at the end of the day it is a national monopoly. The one other thing I should say, just to reinforce the point about top down versus up, one of the changes in our legislation that we passed through Parliament recently was the Commonwealth Bank, our largest bank, and anybody else that wants to, can go direct to its own customers. It doesn't need a telco anymore. Bypass telco completely. Same for any company. If you're big enough and you want to establish the system that will allow you to do it, you can create your own direct contact with your customers yourself. You actually don't need a telco. No more clipping the ticket. So our CommBank, our biggest bank, is actually already working on delivering direct to its customers with its own network without using a telecommunications carrier. It can get a license now and do it itself. The open access platform that we've provided lowers the barriers to entry in a way that has never been done before in Australia, and will create more competition, new entrants, and new innovation in ways that we still haven't got a clue about yet. Thank you very much.
A couple of quick questions, but questions, not statements, questions. Because I want to get as many people involved as possible. Over there. I'll take one for Jason.
Questions on
Michael Elling, IDATE Capital. How does mobile play into your whole? You said you have oversight of the frequency.
Yeah, look, we are in the process of clearing our TVs out of the digital dividend. We have the auction next April. We'll turn off the final switchover. We went for more the British European model, region by region. We can go to Big Bang. You guys went all on one day, even though the President was on his first tax delayed for a few months. So we're gradually working through. We'll switch off the last of our cities in December next year. And it'll probably take 9 to 12 months for everything to be shifted, restacked as we call it, so that the digital dividend income, digital dividend spectrum will be available. But like everybody else in the sector, we don't think that's going to be enough either. So we're also working internationally to try and harmonise opening up. At the moment, 600, 700 we're selling off. We're selling off about 120. But we also recognise the 800 up to 900 is potentially going to be needed as well. Having said that, the debate about wireless versus fixed line gets a big run in Australia because, you know, people go home and they walk in from their home with their iPad and they haven't plugged it into anything, so it must still be on the 3G network, right? No, most Australians, probably most people, don't realise Wi-Fi is attached to a fixed line. I want to thank Bob and the Cisco guys for demonstrating that fixed Wi-Fi, as now referred to in their data, continues to grow far more than downloads. About 92% of our downloads are either on Wi-Fi or on fixed line. So in terms of download capacity, you've got to build the fibre as deep as you can. So we've taken the decision to go as deep as we can. I don't mind if they want to set up femto cells, pico cells, whatever small cells they want. You're not going to be able to build a tower on every street corner. I don't know how the debates in America go. In Australia, mobile phone towers create cancer in the head, so we all wear tinfoil hats. And so you get a lot of community resistance to, just like, I want better mobile coverage, you don't want a tower to deliver it. So we believe ultimately we need fibre as deep as possible. If you want to think of the NBN as the biggest piece of backhaul for a wireless network, go for it. I'm quite happy. But we're more than happy for femto cells, pico cells, any other type of cells, DMO, BMO, anything else we want to come up with to use the NBN as its backhaul.
Is there a theoretical maximum on the number of operators?
No, we've got 40 at the moment. Now, there will be some market shakeouts. Some of them are small, just literally region-based, suburban-based at the moment. Do I see that being the case long-term? No. We've traditionally been dominated by one telco, plus a sort of medium-sized second telco, and then a bunch of third-tier telcos. There's been a lot of rationalisation in the marketplace in the lead-up to the NBN coming on. So there's been a lot of mid-tiers have merged together to try and make themselves competitive. Telstra have a number of inherent advantages. Firstly, the deal we did, even though I was joking about how tough the laws were, we did a deal with Telstra for them to close down their copper network. They are transferring their customers and decommissioning their copper network. They're transferring them onto the fibre. We pay them per customer. We're closing down to avoid cherry picking the HFC network. So I got this in Telstra, we've only got two. And they stopped competing against each other after both losing about $4 to $5 billion in the 1990s. They literally stopped their infrastructure builds when Telstra drove the challenger literally bankrupt. But they didn't care how much they lost, they were protecting future revenue. So they behaved exactly as your incumbent monopolist would expect them to behave. They drove the other company bankrupt. So all infrastructure competition came to stop. So we're closing down those two networks, very controversial. You know, closing down infrastructure competition, except it only covers 28% of the population and stopped any further rollouts when it went bankrupt. And Telstra stopped any further rollouts once it driven the other companies bankrupt.
One last question.
Identify yourself. David Burstein. I read about this stuff Try to turn it into a question. It's absolutely just a question. Because when Steve Wozniak...
Questions only.
Oh, but you gotta let me this one, Bob. Steve Wozniak has just said he's applying for Australian citizenship because he likes the NBN so much. Question, real question, coming up with Larry Strickling about to talk about Wicked. U.S. position is that government should not... Okay, it's a question. Given that Australia's inter-exchange traffic in transit is somewhere between 3 and 20 times the international standard, do you think the Australian government should be excluded from that discussion because that doesn't belong in international treaty rules? Or do you think government sometimes should do something about problems like that?
When did you stop eating your wife?
No, look, first because I didn't get a chance to quite finish my speech, so there were a couple of points just because I'm running out of time and I can talk under wet cement because you're discovering now some of you have been before. In terms of the Wicked debate, two things. Firstly, there is no justification for a new charge between countries. None, zero. We are already paying an exorbitant amount of money, as you've identified. I've often said if the international market doesn't improve, for $250 million out of a budget of $40 billion, I'll build an extra pipe between here and the US to drive the prices down. So I mean, very clear. If they do not start responding to market pressure. Now, we've got a couple of commercial prospects in the offing, so I haven't wanted to leak into the international connection market, but we are charged far too much. And that would be exactly why I do not support any further charging between countries. I just think we're already getting ripped off, and I wouldn't want to be barracking for the ISOC-NY proposal, with apologies to my friends who are here representing us today. Secondly, the Internet has developed extraordinarily over the last 20 years. Our existing regulatory arrangements, ITU, etc., have served us well. There'd have to be a very strong case made, and I don't believe that case has been made, to make a substantive change to the way that we regulate at the moment. So I hope that goes towards answering your question. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.